Hey guys, before jumping into today's episode, we just quickly wanted to acknowledge the ongoing boycott of St. Martin's Publishing Company and denouncement of their discriminatory actions. We hope it goes without saying, but we at RPH do not stand for genocide, racism, homophobia, or discrimination of any kind, and want to explicitly state our support for the Palestinian people. While this book that we'll be reading has distributed U.S. copies with St. Martin's Publishing, the author of Gwen and Art Are Not in Love, Lex Croucher, is not signed under St. Martin's Publishing and has been very vocal about their denouncement of genocide and discrimination. It is for those reasons, as well as our adamant celebration of pride in the face of publishing companies that do not support its queer readers of color, we will be reading the copy of Croucher's novel that was published under Bloomsbury. If you also wish to support Croucher, please consider purchasing your copy from Bloomsbury as well.
Welcome to the Raunchy Power Hour, a book club for discussing romance from the erotic to the erroneous. As always, this is an explicit podcast and contains strong language, adult themes, and sexual content. If you are sensitive to these things, we urge you calmly but sincerely to turn off your radio now. This month, we are reading Gwen and Art Are Not in Love by Lex Croucher. This is part 2 of Gwen and Art Are Not in Love, and this podcast will contain spoilers for the entire book. If you want to read along with us, stop listening now, for God's sakes. It's okay, we'll wait for you to come back. This is our concluding episode of Gwen and Art Are Not in Love. If you haven't already, please go listen to part 1. Yes, we'll wait again. Okay, you're done. Okay, cool. This book contains themes of violence, homophobia, struggles with mental health, including depression, unhealthy relationships with alcohol, parental death, and parental abuse. You have been warned.
I'm your producer, Ashlyn.
I'm the fool that comes to dance and make the court giggle with glee, Sydney.
And I am that one bucket of piss that's always in every single Game of Thrones episodes in royal chambers because they don't have functioning bathrooms. And specifically, I'm a little bit of that piss dribble that's coagulated and is dripping off the side of this ugly, smelly bucket. Now get ready to get raunchy, or rancid, I guess. A question for you.
If I want a question from the rancid pee bucket.
Because is a normal bodily I have crazy eyes right now. I'm watching myself in the viewfinder and I'm fully just like, it's normal. I'm like,
I swear it's normal. It is a completely normal bodily function. However, the way you described it makes me thoroughly disgusted. However, what is your question so we can move forward from this little bit that you've created?
Yeah, no, that's fair. If you, and continuing with the theme from last episode's question, were to be the ruler of, we'll call it Sydney Land, this fictitious kingdom that you have monarched.
I love Sydneyland.
Sydneyland's a great place. If you were the ruler of Sydneyland and had to make your first ever rule change or proclamation as queen, what would it be? And it has to be uniquely flavored to you, just anything you want.
You've stunned me into silence because there's so many things I would love to be in a royal decree.
You were silenced, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I know. In my royal decree, okay, here's what I do. Hear ye, all the citizens of Sydneyland. From henceforth, everyone must at least read one gay novel thrice a year. It could be whatever you want. It could be weird. It could be funny, it could be silly, but it has to be genuine. It can't just be pornography.
I hate to break it to you. Your royal decree voice sounds vaguely like your Trump impersonation from the presidential episode.
Okay, let me go. Hear ye, hear ye.
Who is that supposed to be?
I don't know. That came from somewhere deep within me, and I'm kind of scared where that came from. So, Lauren, what would your royal decree be?
Oh my gosh. I think I think I would want to establish a day every single year where every single year it's where all of the dairy and the milk harvested from our livestock is turned into cheese, and that cheese is used to eat Kraft mac and cheese, which I will develop as good queen of this nation.
Of course.
Yeah, nothing can stop my royal prowess. And we eat that the entire day, the entire kingdom. We just have a huge mac and cheese, Saint Mac Day or something. I don't know, Mac Daddy.
The Saint Mac festivals,
Yeah, and everyone just fuck the lactose intolerant, right? We all get out in a circle and we eat mac and cheese until we literally can't even breathe.
Lactose intolerance doesn't exist that day. It's only the night after. It's only the wee hours of the morning afterwards.
Honestly, I feel like all of our immune systems back in medieval times would be so delicate that the first sign of constipation per lactose intolerance would be put you in the grave. It really would.
Oh, actually, I just came up with a better royal decree for me. Damn.
What is it?
Hear ye, all. Okay. Hear ye, all who lives within Sydney land. Mm-hmm. Everyone must attend the Bar Chapel Roan, and they must know the HOTTOGO dance. They must be able to go HOTTOGO.
I love that we're time traveling Chapel Roan back to medieval times.
Oh, hell yeah. She's a bard, too. Actually, no, she is a saint. The Saint Chapel Roan. And you must know, and you must praise her, and just so I can have, a private audience and just be like, concert.
Is she your personal court bard? I have to ask. Only answers to you?
I mean, I would love that, but she's such a free spirit that I wouldn't want to keep her, I want to share her talents throughout the whole land, not just me.
I respect that. That. Maybe we can combine our 2 days, mac and cheese and Chapel Roan Day.
Yeah. Oh no, Chapel Roan Day is the day before because everyone gets really is very gets a lot of exercise, and then next day is mac and cheese day because I fear if we do mac and cheese day before Chapel Roan, everyone's gonna be shitting their pants and not be able to go watch Chapel.
That's a good call.
There we go.
But with that, speaking of getting drunk and shitting your pants, do you remember the plot of the book from part 1? And would you like to remind everyone of Gwen and Art are not in love in the first 20 chapters that we discussed?
Sure. I feel like we should do a timed thing where we only have a minute to summarize the book, if anything.
Ashlyn, can you please pull up a timer for our dear squire as she relays the message in wonderful tales of Gwendolyn
in under 1 minute.
In 1 minute.
I feel like this will have to be our new bit. Okay, are we ready? Tell me when.
Sorry, I have so many computer screens. Are you ready, dear squire?
I am as ready as I'll ever be.
Begin.
So Gwen and Art aren't in love. Follow Gwen and Art, who surprisingly are not in love. They're actually two little gay kids who also love other people. Gwen loves Bridget, who's like this lady knight, and Gwen has seen her like a couple summers, and she comes into town, and Gwen's like, "Ooh, hi, Bridget," and Bridget's like, "I think you're gay, but I'm not quite sure." Anyway, so Arthur is Gwen's betrothed, and he's like, I hate her," and he has to come to Camelot, so he does that, and then he runs into Gabriel, and Gabriel's like, "Hi," and Arthur's like, "He's kind of hot, but I'm not going to do anything about it." Anyway, going into like the next chapter, like they like talk and they like hate each other for like no reason. And as this is like happening, Gwen goes outside because she's frustrated, but then she sees Arthur kissing a dude while she's sneaking a look at Lady Leclerc. And then Arthur's like, "Hey, bitch, you saw me kiss a dude, but you were looking at a girl." And Gwen's like, "No, I wasn't. You can't prove it." And Arthur's like, "No, boom, I can. I have your diary now. We're blackmail. So now you have to fake date me so that we can both like be gay and do crimes." And Gwen's like, "Cool, fine, I guess." Anyway, so they're like both hiding each other all the while they're both falling in love with like Gabriel and Bridget, and like all these things keep happening, like Bridget being in a joust, Gabriel and Arthur going into like the library and like bonding, and then Gabriel and Arthur kiss first in like the little bird area, and then Bridget and Gwen don't kiss until later, but that's okay. And then Gwen tries to come out to Gabriel, and Gabriel's like, "No, I'm too scared and gay myself, so I can't accept that you're doing this to me right now." Anyway, so Gwen is like sort of fighting with Bridget, and like that's all cool. And then Gabriel tries to fight Arthur, and then Arthur flirts, and Gabriel's like, "Ah!" and runs away. And then as this is all happening, Arthur tries to comfort Gwen, and Gwen is like, "I'm so sad my brother doesn't like that I'm gay." And Arthur's like, "No, he is pretty gay. He kissed me." But he goes like kiss Gabriel again, but then oh no, there's an assassin trying to kill Gabriel for no reason whatsoever, which is so weird. But it's okay. Bridget was there to stab him, so the assassin at least, not Gabriel. So she does that, and there's like a dead man. And as that happens, then Gwen's like, "Oh, I need to go make sure Bridget's okay." And then Bridget's kind of okay, but then they kiss, and then everything's fine. Yay.
2 minutes and 10 seconds.
2 minutes or 1 minute?
2 minutes and 10 seconds.
I am howling at the way that you were absolutely blowing out the mic the entire time, just screaming into it.
I wasn't trying to. I was just trying to get through this as fast as I could. I'm so sorry.
Listen, you were delivering it just like a squire would, going through a mouthpiece and being like,
Hear ye, everybody. Listen to my tales of woe.
brava, brava, cheers for Squire.
Thank you. Squire Sid, thank you. Thank you very much.
Sydney. That was wonderful. Thank you. You hit literally all of the relevant points, and I very much appreciate it because now I don't have to backtrack and explain stuff that we timed out for. So that's good.
You're welcome. I'm going to go catch my breath now.
Indeed. While you do that, I will do just a super quick reminder of our main characters here that you probably already gleaned from Sydney's wonderful explanation. But before we jump in, we will start with Gwendolyn and Arthur, who are the two perspectives that we will be jumping back and forth throughout the remainder of this story. As Sydney so wonderfully mentioned, Gwen is betrothed to Arthur, but they originally hated each other. Now, at this point in the story, they hate each other much less so. They may be friends, dare we say. And they are both separately in love with Gabriel, who is Gwendolyn's brother and prospective heir to the throne. And Bridget, who is a lady knight, who is competing in this like tournament, and it's notable because women can't be knights. What in the Timbuktu liberal hell? So, you know, that's kind of a thing. Other characters to note, Gwen and Gabriel do have parents. Where are they most of the book? Who's to fucking say? Running a country, I guess. Really, they're so YA, like truly just like out of the picture 90% of the time. Anyway, there are other characters. There's Sydney, who is Arthur's bodyguard and besto friendo. They get
Not
on,
me.
they go. Yes, not podcast Sydney. This is
Not podcast
actual
Sydney.
real Squire Sydney. We'll call him.
Real Squire Sydney.
Yes, and then Squire Sydney's little girly fan, who is Agnes, which is Gwendolyn's lady in waiting.
Are you sure it's not Aang's like I was saying throughout the entire
It is Avatar Aang's, the last airbender. We love it. But unless there's anything else that my lovely lady in waiting would like to tackle?
I can't remember anything. I think I just forgot to point out in my quick fire review. There's also like a lot of Arthurian lore, which I cannot do in under 3 minutes. So
Yeah.
just know that that's there. They're in the world of Arthurian lore and they live in Camelot. Figure out the rest or go listen to part 1 again.
Absolutely. Give us views. Give us money.
Actually, well, money would be nice because we're not making anything currently.
Hey, they don't need to know that. We don't need to tell them we're poor. Okay. Actually, we're indebted because we pay for Craig every month.
Yeah. We're actually
as
losing
Ashlyn.
money. We lose money
Yeah.
every single month by paying for Craig. Well, Ashlyn does. We love you, Ashlyn.
You know what's funny? Sid and I have jobs and we don't pay for Craig. Oh well. Anywho, without further ado, we are going to jump in to chapter 21 of Gwen and Art Are Not in Love. Now, at this point in the story, the tournament is in high swing, and I almost said Gwen. Lord, I'm tired. This is off to a great start. And Bridget is competing in a jousting match. Now, it's important to know that Bridget previously did get beat to shit by a guy called the Knife, who is basically the dog, essentially, of the king's cousin. Not hugely important, but he's kind of a dickhead and sort of put her out of commission relatively. And so this is sort of the first time where I felt like we really got to see Bridget's prowess in battle, because in one fell swoop, she and the advances on to the next round. Now, Arthur and Gwen are sitting up in the royal stand, sort of watching the proceedings. Gwen obviously cheering and being just really excited over Bridget. And it is during the scene where Arthur susses out, essentially, that Gwen and Bridget had their kiss in the previous chapter. There's a little bit of light banter. They're teasing each other back and forth. And it's overall just a really wholesome scene. And you think things are going smoothly until later on, Arthur finds out that his father, who, as we mentioned in part 1, what gay comes without daddy issues, right? It's par for the course. Arthur has a bit of daddy issues with his father, who is a bit very just a lot riding on this betrothal between Arthur and Gwen. There's a lot of pressure on Arthur from his father of you must go to Camelot this summer and make sure things go well. You got to ensure our position. You know, the Arthur Pendragon bloodline is dwindled in us, and it's up to you to reset, blah, blah, right? A lot of daddy issues. He gets this letter from him essentially doubling down on all of that and being you got to get closer to Gwen. And surprise, surprise, you son of a bitch, there's a wedding date that we are setting for you two at the end of this summer. Now, while this is the arrangement that Arthur and Gwen had originally of hey, let's just go along with this and then pursue our personal pleasures in private, I think it becomes a little bit too real for Arthur and Gwen at this point of oh, there's a wedding date now. This potentially is going to be the rest of our lives. And Sid, I want to ask you, at this point, did you think that a wedding was going to happen?
If I'm being completely honest, no. I was I feel like something's going to happen, or something's going to happen at the altar, at the latest.
Would you have been mad?
If they had gone through with it?
Yeah.
Yes and no, because I would have loved if then Bridget and Gabriel got married.
Ooh, that's tea. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, that would have been good. But at the same time, I was thinking, Bridget wouldn't have done that. That's out of Bridget's character. Yeah. If she were another high lady, then that would have made sense. But Bridget's a knight, and there's no way anyone would be why the fuck did the knight catch the prince? That pairing does not make sense. Arthur and Gwen make sense because they've been betrothed to each other, but the knight has nothing getting to the ground. Nothing. So would have loved that, but I assumed it was going to be something at the altar, something was going to change so they didn't have to go through with it, or something was going to happen so they didn't have to go through with it. Didn't know what though.
Fully agree. And I actually really like that idea of Bridget and Gabriel. I think that's very spicy. But
I was reading a different book called More Than Best Friends, and that was kind of like the setup in that book for like a second book afterwards. Because it's like two girls who were like in Victorian England wanting to like be with each other, but they know they have to be get husbands, and then it's kind of hinted that there's one person that's close to them that is gay, and there's another guy, and they're like, well, what if you marry him and I marry him? And then we just like,
oh, that put that on the list. I want to go read that.
I'll put it on the list for us.
Yes, please. But in response to Arthur's dad's letter, Arthur's always the drama queen. We love him. I say that with affection. And spends like an hour, I'm pretty sure, like sort of just stamping around his room, being like, how do I respond? I want to piss him off, and blah, blah, blah. But in doing so, he also, I believe in this chapter, sends for some materials from his essentially like wet nurse figure, is my understanding, that he wants sent to Camelot. So in chapter 22, Gwen has also received news that they are to be wed this summer. And at this point, she's kind of been tied up for what sounds like at least a week or two, just sort of like in the throes of wedding planning. And really, she's sort of getting fed up at this point. Like she's constantly being monitored and she's literally being fitted for a dress when she's sort of like in her desperation of like, oh my God, I've been so cooped up, really wants or ends up agreeing to sort of like go out on the town for a night with Arthur and co. And it's important to note that it also happens to be her birthday.
Hey,
it's her birthday. Happy birthday, Gwen. But yes, Arthur organizes a party on the town where it is him, Gwen, Sydney, and Agnes. They attempt to invite Gabriel. Well, not directly, but Gabriel's like tied up doing, I don't know, study shit with Lord Stafford, who's like,
there's just a lot of guards around him, so there's like gonna be no way to get like in a good way to get him away.
Indeed, and 30% anyway, and so they are like, let's just go. Arthur throws together a horrendous looking mustache from Lucifer the cat's fur and puts it on Gwen's face. Like they pull her hair up. They try to get her to like sort of embody more like masculine, like walking and like features. And she's just like failing pretty miserably. Yeah. But they enter this tavern and, you know, the scene is so lively and boisterous that it doesn't really matter. So much so that Arthur actually has a present for Gwendolyn. And it is Lady Bridget.
So freaking cute. I love it so much.
I know. I thought this was really sweet. He invites Bridget. Bridget comes with two of her friends to this tavern. And this is where pretty much her and Gwen get to like openly sort of like dance and kiss and be coupley. Because regardless of whether you could see through Gwen's disguise, this tavern doesn't really pay much attention. Everyone's inebriated. Everyone's having a good time. And so they sort of get to be themselves. And it's this really cute scene where Gwen gets to sort of really let loose a drink from the first time. And everyone seems to be having fun until Arthur just sort of like ghosts away from the party. He ends up sort of like straying outside a bit. Gwen notices, she goes outside to sort of talk to him and notices he's sort of in this like melancholic mood in which, as another part of her birthday present, Arthur hands her back the diary that he took as collateral back in like chapter 3 or 4. And this is sort of like a show of good faith of like, we've achieved this point in our relationship where like, I don't need to be holding this over you anymore. And, you know, I really respect you and, you know, let's let bygones be bygones. And it's this really tender moment between the two that I actually really liked. And it's probably one of my favorite scenes throughout the book. So while that chapter ends well, the next chapter doesn't necessarily. There's another party that's going to go on in the following chapter, chapter 23, this one for Gabriel. Now, this is a procession where I assume all the fine ladies of the realm have been invited to sort of be like paraded around, essentially, in hopes of sort of becoming wives. Why did I say wives? They're not polyamorous. Wife. Singular. Sorry, I'm trying to turn this into a whole new story.
Singular wife.
Singular wife. For Gabriel, who again is going to be king one of these days. Now, Arthur catches wind of this, and in fact, Gabriel's kind of been avoiding him anyway, just between like being like under lock and key, essentially, and they just haven't really had time to interface. And being Arthur, essentially, Arthur does what Arthur wants to do. He gets insanely jealous, and against Sydney's like admonishments of like, oh my god, like, you know, we don't have to break up the party, like you could come to the courtyard with me and Agnes and we could like all hang out and take your mind off things. Arthur is just in a bitch fit, to put it for lack of a better term, and essentially storms and sneaks his way into the Great Hall where this like procession is being held. He sees Gabriel chatting to what is described, I believe, as like a mousy, she's like beautiful but like sort of in that like reserved kind of like bookish way woman. Yeah. And on paper it looks like they should be a perfect match, and I think this almost like riles Arthur up a little more. And Gabriel, funnily enough, is actually not having any of it. He's not inviting this woman to dance, not really like kind of picking up on anything she's putting down, but nonetheless Arthur is still jealous, and so he kind of like gets Gabriel on his own at some point, as they're standing near Lord Stafford, who, just for the record, is sort of like, I don't actually know his title. Like,
he's just
what
an advisor to the king. He's an advisor to the king.
He's been consulting a lot on these like brewing, like talks of uprising among the Arthurian cultists, being helmed by this cousin, Lord Willard, of the king. And so he spends a lot of time with Gabriel, the king, and whatnot, and he's made a few appearances throughout the story at this point. Now, they're all talking, and, you know, Gabriel's kind of being in, what is it, emo gay panic? Is that what we're calling it?
Very much emo gay panic. Like, emo library gay panic.
That's a perfect descriptor, Sid. He's in emo gay panic, and he's kind of like, oh, like, please leave me alone. Please don't talk to me. Like, do you have anything better to do? Yada, yada. In this whole back and forth, Arthur ends up telling Lord Stafford that Gabriel is like this really smart and has, you know, a lot of potential for a king, and that, you know, Lord Stafford is just not listening to him and all these brilliant ideas that he has, such as wanting to divert some funds from, you know, essentially military into turning like this like tower into like an education center and teaching normal civilians how to read. And he does this in good faith, you know, just putting that out there, does it in good faith, and then takes off after Gabriel. Well, actually, no, just kidding. Sorry. He takes off after the woman Gabriel was talking with, gives her a little whirl around the dance floor, and then says, come outside with me, knowing that this will perturb Gabriel, who then comes after them. And they have an exchange. The girl is dismissed, and it gets really heated. Arthur sort of like his ego is a little bit injured, and he, you know, was really upset with how like Gabriel is very obviously pushing him away. Basically, it's a whole lot of talk of like duty. You know, I'm duty bound. I can't be doing this with you. I'm supposed to take a wife, yada, yada. And it's then where we learn that Arthur letters that he has unearthed from his, I guess, like father's collection. That is an exchange between Sir Lancelot and Arthur Pendragon that seem very romantically charged in nature.
Very. If that were the case, sorry, this is me going into what I know about Arthurian lore, then that means Gwendolyn, Arthur, and Lancelot would have been like the best throuple. But that also defeats... But then that also defeats like the whole ending of the story, which is like the whole battle, because like Lancelot takes Guinevere like away and stuff. Then like they basically fight over her. And then I think Arthur doesn't kill Lancelot, but I think Lancelot like goes off and like lives the rest of his life in sorrow or something. I don't remember.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I can't remember in this book. So in Gwen and Art, Not in Love, they make a reference to, is it Guinevere in this book? Guinevere liking Lancelot. And like,
yes.
Is that true? Okay.
Yes. So in the original lore, that is like the whole thing, is that Lancelot and Guinevere were also in love. So Guinevere loved Arthur, but she also fell in love with Lancelot. And basically, when Guinevere ran off with Lancelot, Arthur was deeply hurt because not only was it his best friend, it was also his wife, and that love.
This is tea. How do you feel about this like spin on the story then?
I don't mind it. I kind of like to view then what happened is that King Arthur and Lancelot just got into a really bad lover spat. And Guinevere was just kind of forced to pick sides, and she was just like, "I guess I'm just going to go with Lancelot and let Arthur cool down." And then things like kind of blew up. I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted about the letters.
How so?
It's like a very convenient plot point. I'll be honest. I feel like there could have been something different.
I think I agree.
Yeah.
I think I agree.
So if this were in a more adult book, if this were in more adult, if this was not in a YA book, I would be shitting on this so much harder. But because this is a YA book, I'm going to let it slide.
Yeah. There's a term that I'm actually looking for right now, and I can't seem to find it. But it's that term where like you bring something up within like a story or like a piece of media that like was not present in the plot before, and like there was no real like allusions to it, and then have it out of nowhere to sort of like solve an issue or to like create a solution to an issue. And I don't know if this is quite. Yes, thank you. That's exactly what it is. This, I don't think it's 100% that, but it definitely has like the undertones of that. Because I'm with you. There wasn't a whole lot of like, I feel like I had introduced this concept a little earlier on or like alluded to it in some way. Maybe with like, I don't know, this is just very cheap and on the nose, but like, you know, a portrait of Arthur Pendragon somewhere where like Lancelot and has, you know, like is staring at him in a certain way or like whatever.
Or like
right?
has his arm, like his hand on his shoulder, and it's just like viewed as like, you know, a knight protecting his king. Where it's like, oh, that made best friends, roommates, anything but lovers.
Yes.
History hates lovers.
Yes, I fully agree. Yeah, I think because at this point I'm fairly certain this is the first mention of Lancelot in the entire book. Which
Lancelot
obviously existed, but like
Lancelot was mentioned, but it was more like, yeah, I have way too many cousins named Arthur, Lancelot, Gawain, and all of that. And it's like, yeah, funny. But yeah, I think this is the first introduction of his character.
Agreed. I'm right there with you.
I would have, yeah. It just, so the other reason it bothers me is, again, going back to like the Arthurian lore. I don't know. It's one of those situations, and it's one of those plot points and this is just like the sad point about it. It's like it's too, especially when it comes to these queer romances, sometimes things like just work out for convenience sake and like something is gay, but it's like, but it probably wasn't, you know? Does that make sense? Like it's too good to be true. Yeah. And it bends the reality too much for me, and it kind of loses me. But at the same time, here's the thing. The reason I'm not going to hate on this plot point too hard is because, again, this is a YA novel. The target audience for this book is not me. I'm a 24-year-old woman. I am not a 14-year-old girl reading this. And if I was a teenage girl reading this, I wish we had this book when it was our age, you know? So is the plot point a little juvenile? Yes. But that's the book demographic and the target audience. Yeah. So I'm not going to shit on it super hard. Again, if this were targeted towards our age, then I'd be like, what the fuck was that?
I'm with you. It is giving much very like, I talked with a friend actually, I was reading this book where I was like, I actually don't read a lot of queer YA books simply because of tropes like that, where it's very much like everyone and everything is gay for the sake of plot. And it's like, well, and sometimes it feels like a little overbearing. This sounds very like Republican of me. I promise I'm not. But like, you know what I mean? Where it's just very much like that rainbow washing, I think, a bit of like everything is this way. And sometimes to me that isn't ever like you said, the realism I think is lost on me. And this sort of gives me a similar taste of like, because I would almost rather Gabriel come to his own conclusion of like, I can be the king that I want to be. And I can be gay because that's me, not because Arthur Pendragon did it, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Because, like, I know. So by the end of the book, he's like, yeah, I'm going to be the man I want to be and all of that. And I'm going to be the king I want to be. And I should fight for something. And this is going to be something I fight for. It does feel slightly less genuine because he's like, but also because Arthur Pendragon did it. And it's like, but. Yeah, it's just, I wish there's a different plot device because unfortunately, I think the reason this also is just a little sour is that a lot of the rest of the plot in this book depends on these random letters, which have just been found.
Yes.
So I kind of also would have wished Gabriel would have had that moment independently and finally stepped back and be like, I am not King Arthur. I don't want to be him. I want to be Gabriel, King Gabriel. And
I agree.
By me being me, I'm gay. I'm a gay king. Slay.
Slay your enemies.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Slay your enemies.
Slay. Yes. Speaking of these, how was it said again, Ashlyn? Deus Machina?
Deus Ex Machina.
Deus Ex
God
Machina.
Lauren, you should know that. That's like your favorite. That's like your favorite group of D&D characters.
I know. Vox Machina. I do think of it every time I hear it. But speaking of this, Gabriel brings said letters to Gwen after him and Arthur have that row. It's a very heated exchange where Arthur storms off, kind of like, pushing the letters into his chest or whatnot. Gabriel brings the letters to Gwen. They sort of pour over them and they're like, oh my God, I've never heard of this. Like, maybe the rest of these were burned. This is only from Lancelot's side. Like, but it sounds reciprocated. Like, I wonder if, yada, yada, right? They essentially make some jokes about like, oh, this has been around for a while. And, stuff has just been lost or burned, and intentionally gotten rid of. Like, this could be wonderful for like getting this kingdom in this country, like back on track. And like, this could go over well with the cultists and like, so on and so forth. Right. Now they're having this discussion when I believe it was like essentially during this scene or like later that day, they hear a whole lot of like commotion coming from outside and find that Arthur had gotten jumped by a group of boys outside of a tavern that he had gone to following the argument with Gabriel.
Yeah. And so big trigger warning here, guys, for like hate crimes and violence against gay people. Yeah. So if you're not comfortable with that, unfortunately, that's like the next couple chapters and you're uncomfortable. It's okay. We'll see you next time. You can jump off here.
For sure. Essentially, the understanding of the events is that Michael, who was kind of like a dog handler, like some kind of, court servant.
He was the boy Arthur was kissing at the beginning of the book.
Yes. Had, met up with Arthur.
I thought it was Mitchell.
It might be Mitchell.
It's Mitchell.
Whoops.
Okay.
Some
well,
white
Gwen
boy
refers to him as like Michael or something at the beginning because she doesn't know his name. It's Mitchell. We find
M-boy. The boy Arthur was kissing. Let's just refer to him as that. It doesn't matter.
You're right. The boy Arthur was kissing. They kiss again, or go to kiss again, rather, outside of this tavern, and that is when he gets attacked. Arthur is pretty much like completely out of it at this point. He is got some ribs that have been cracked. He's bleeding profusely. He's very banged up and just like barely hanging onto a shred of consciousness. Sydney had dragged him back from the tavern. He had been keeping watch inside the tavern while Arthur went out with this kid. And didn't realize until it was already too late. The group is together in the hallway. Bridget comes walking up on this scene where Arthur's like splayed out in the hallway. She asks like, what's going on? They tell her, and she sort of has this like moment, this like crosses across her face of like almost like recognition. And then she goes, I'll be back. Very like ominously, and then just exits stage right.
I love her. I love her for that. I love her so much for that.
I do too. It was a good scene. Now, chapter 25. Essentially, in the course of this chapter, a month elapses.
Yeah.
Arthur is in bad shape, so much so that they do not think he's going to make it. We are in his perspective for this chapter, so it's like an amalgamation of like these blips of time. And so for a bit of it, you kind of like don't really know sort of where we're at in the plot. And it's only until he really comes to that we find out it's been a month. And there's little vignettes here of like, Gwen sort of like laying next to him on this bed and like helping him. Sydney has barely slept, always like slumping in this chair. Agnes has stayed with Sydney a little bit. And Gabriel, most notably, has been coming in, but is a lot more... You can tell he's guilt-ridden, put it that way. Mm-hmm. He's extremely guilt-ridden. He, just kind of always has this like really like pinched, pensive face when he's there. And there's a moment in one of these vignettes where Arthur sort of like comes to for a bit. And Gabriel is there and tells him it's been 2 weeks since the attack. And, Arthur can't believe it. And I think like almost like fear sort of overcomes him as he's like slipping back into unconsciousness. And he's telling Gabriel, like, stay with me. Like, don't go. Don't go. Don't go.
Heart. This broke my heart.
I know. And he's like holding his hand and just blacks out.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, I'm tearing up a little bit. That broke my heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, the angst.
And it's tough. The angst. It was so good. I was like, my AO3 days
such
have been
good
revived.
Angst. It's so good. It's what I needed. So much sweetness. No angst.
I know. Meanwhile, the whole friend group is just being very affected by this. There's a point where Arthur gets a fever. They like literally have to like shave his head, and they don't know if he's going to pull through. And this is really taking a toll on all of them. But we are back in Gwen's perspective, and she's in her chambers, pretty much a nervous wreck. And Bridget, comes in. And, it's sort of this like unspoken understanding that I guess over the past month, Bridget has been there sort of as an emotional support for Gwen. And meanwhile, has also been kicking ass in the tournament.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. She's made it as a finalist or in the final round of combats. I don't fucking know how tourney works.
She's the final round in jousting.
Yes. And, Gwen is trying to be like happy for her while also like reconciling with like Arthur may not even make it. And they have this moment where it's the two of them in the chambers. They're laying on the bed together, sort of like consoling and comforting each other. When they start delving into a conversation of sort of like, what are we and what's next? Where Gwen starts asking about Bridget, like, what's Bridget going to do after the tournament's over? And much to Gwen's dismay, Bridget basically says, like, well, I'm going home. I have other tourneys that I want to compete in. And like, I could be back for Christmas or I'll be back next summer. And Gwen, I don't think it really computes with Gwen that was really the arrangement. She very much kind of expected, I think, her and Bridget to sort of like be more quote unquote serious than that. And for them to sort of like Bridget to stay back as like potentially even a lady in waiting, but that like is everything that Bridget is against, it's like being stuffed into dresses and waiting hand and foot after Gwen. And it's just not her, Yeah. And there's a really tough conversation I really want to ask you about, Sid, for your thoughts on, but essentially the conversation is just really tense. And I think Gwen is very injured by it and interprets this as Bridget not really holding Gwen as special as Gwen holds Bridget. And I think Bridget comes at this from a perspective of like, I just won't change myself for anyone. I can still love you while also being my own person. And Gwen hasn't quite recognized that yet. And I wanted to get your thoughts or your interpretation on it.
So my thought, because I remember writing this, was it's going back to what she said during the Morgan Le Fay celebration. She knows who she is. She knows what she wants. And she knows that doing that sort of life that Gwen is asking her isn't what she wants and what she needs. And I don't think it's necessarily coming from a place of trying to be cruel to Gwen in any way, sense of war, or like not, or being like, I think it was just a simple misunderstanding of Gwen, but at the same time, I think it was just Gwen. Hi, Wally. My cat has something to say about what we are talking about right now, and I'm so sorry, listeners. It was, I mean, I think it was just Gwen again opening herself up and being like, I'm going through a really tough time right now, and I really need your support. I need you here. And I think Bridget was trying to be the most gentle and saying, I know you need me, but I know me giving up my life just to have these little moments with you, it isn't enough. And honestly, I think that comes, I don't think it's like mean or disingenuous. I think it's very honest and truthful. It does hurt to see Gwen so upset because I'm like, no, Gwen, it's not that she doesn't love you. It's not that she doesn't like you. It's that she understands what she wants. And unfortunately, she did tell you that. So, yeah.
Yeah. As someone who has always been historically very fiercely independent in my relationships, romantic or otherwise, this scene really resonated with me a lot. Like initially, I think I felt more of Gwen's emotions because we're just like literally in her head. You know, it's hard not to separate yourself from that. But I think I took a break at like a couple chapters after this and like reflected on it. And I was like, no, this is wonderful representation of like you can still have a very healthy relationship while still being two individuals, not always together, maybe even being apart months at a time and like just cheering each other on in your individual successes. And that you can still function very healthily in that way. And I was really excited to see that representation and that like sort of like selfless love be brought out in Gwen and brought out in a story like this. And I think in terms of this being in a YA book, I was really impressed with like, I think personally, this is a great message to send, you know, and yeah, it's a very healthy example of love. Obviously not the only example, but like a great one to show off.
Yeah. Also, I just realized this too, and I think that this is really great too. I don't think from either of our two main couples we hear the term love. I don't think they ever said I love you to each other, which I kind of like because they're like, yeah, we've only known each other for a couple months.
They're also like all so young. I think the oldest is 18, right?
Young. They're all so young. I think Gabriel and Arthur are 18. I think she just turned 18 herself. So they must be 19 or 20 or something.
Yeah. Something
and then
there.
Bridget is also 18. But yeah, they're all very young. So I do love that they're not being like, I love you. Like we're not having the I love you confession, you know?
Yeah, me too.
I just realized that and I was like, oh.
No, I did too. Like, I'm glad you pointed it out. But yeah, in this same chapter, right as they're having this like difficult exchange, Sydney actually bursts through the doors and lets them know that Arthur is awake and he's gonna pull through. You know, so they, obviously like all go to visit. Everyone, just like there's an outpouring of love and support. And, again, Sydney's just being like a great friend to Arthur and, just like a wonderful display of like, I think Arthur has finally found his community. And there's this beautiful moment between him and Gabriel where they sort of reference the letters again. And I correct me if I'm wrong, Sid. I think this scene was where like they talked about like, over the past month, they had done some digging and found that Arthur Pendragon did reciprocate the relationship. Like there were other letters that weren't burned or whatever. It was like,
Yeah, that's in
Yeah.
this next chapter in 27.
Yeah. And like, you know, they talk about it. And I think it's sort of this like thing of like, look at what kind of a king you can be. And like, you know, we could bring this back to Camelot and you don't have to hide anymore. And I think Gabriel is still kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I think it's less so about his identity at this point, at least my interpretation, and more so about like, he's just still not ready to be king. Like that's just not his radar. And he doesn't have that confidence in himself yet.
Which is fair. And I think, too, he's also, like, worried because he's like, my dad has never really taken a stance on anything. So how am I supposed to make a stance on something or not?
Real. His dad is a fence rider. Okay.
He do be. He's keeping things together, but by a thread.
True.
I think he pointed it out. I think he said this to Gwen when she tried to get out of the engagement to Arthur, being like, when you're fighting between both sides, one side is always never going to be happy. And you just have to try your best and like keep trying to keep everybody happy.
Yeah. And I think it's in this chapter too, where he's like, I don't want to cause any issues. Like, even if this is something that could go over, like, my father has such tentative peace brokered that like pushing for any widespread change, I think could like really cause a chain effect for the worst. So a lot of like politics sort of intermingled, but
which I kind of love. That's what I love.
I do too.
I kind of have loved throughout this. It's just the little more bit of world building. It's really cool.
I do too. In chapter 26, Bridget has advanced in the tournament. Yay!
Baby, we're at 28. We're at chapter 28, my love.
Oh, sorry. I'm in chapter 28.
We just read 27.
I was wondering. I was like, we're only on 26? 28.
There you go, my love. You're good.
Thank you. They attend the tournament again, and there's a match between Bridget and another knight where it's like, again, another like jousting. However, Bridget ends up losing, and it's a pretty quick fight from my understanding. Like, it only took like one real hit to like knock her down. And this just like, you know, Gwen is like really upset for her, and you know, and because of their argument, though, there's still some sore feelings there. And so there's a moment where she wavers between like, do I just go inside or do I go find Bridget? Ultimately does go seek out Bridget. And we learn that it's basically like Bridget knew that her opponent had cheated. His lance was like sharpened in a way where like it wouldn't splinter or whatnot in a legal way.
No, it was pre-cut. So basically with jousting, it's when you have two people on the opposite sides of the bar and they're like doing the little stick thing and they have to like hit each other with it. So she missed, but he hit her on the second try, which means he won because she didn't even hit him.
Sorry, where does the cheating come in? I'm confused.
The cheating comes in because his thing that he was using was already pre-cut, so he didn't have to hit her that hard.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, so we learned that there's some foul play going on at the tournament. But, you know, Bridget's not going to go contest it, and that's kind of her knocked out of the tournament. And while they're standing and discussing this, like, they have one more conversation about how, like, you know, what are we going to do from here? Like, Gwen basically says, I thought this meant more. And Bridget's like, this does mean a lot to me. And there's this like big sort of like tense moment where basically it leaves Gwen running off, feeling as though all of this was fake. And she, you know, meant so much less to Bridget. And, you know, it's a really heartbreaking scene. But I know. But in her runnings away, she overhears a conversation between two voices, one of which she recognizes as Arthur's father, who, as of note, they knew had come to visit during Arthur's, you know, incapacitation. However, he never once came to actually check in on his son. He just showed up to court being like, oh, I'm here for him, and then never once checked in on him, even when he was on death's door. So she overhears him talking about, what's the name of it again? It's the place up north.
It was a castle up there.
Yeah,
There was
some
an uprising there.
Thank you. Yeah, there's an uprising, and like they'd originally been told, like, all
In
is
the
well, and the comings and goings have been completely innocent. People were visiting family. It's whatever. And Gwen finds this very odd that like they're discussing this thing, and then also Arthur's father is talking a lot about like this discovery that Arthur has shared information with him that will like give them a leg up on like getting in tighter in the royal family. And basically she comes to the conclusion that, oh my god, like I need to check Arthur's belongings, I need to see what's going on. And so she runs, and I'll be real, this scene went by in a blur to me. She finds some letters. I was like, huh? Okay. She finds letters in Arthur's chambers of him talking about how Gabriel is going to be like diverting these funds, and how like this is not a good look for him as a king, and yada yada. And of course,
no, it was from his dad.
Miscommunication trope. Sorry, what?
The letters were from his dad saying all that stuff.
Got
so
you.
she assumed then that that's what
they've been like corresponding about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we immediately hop, skip, and jump to conclusions where Arthur is a manipulative, cheating, lying freak. You know me and my love for the miscommunication trope. It's my favorite. I love it.
I know. And third act breakup. I literally wrote in my notes, I'm like, oh, there it is.
There it is. Between the friends, the ultimate love story.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We knew it was coming. We know it's coming. We hate it every time.
Absolutely. So in the next chapter, chapter 29, we're back on Arthur's perspective. Sydney goes to visit. Arthur's feeling better, but he's not quite really up on his feet yet. He's having trouble walking and staying upright. However, he has this like imminent sort of wordless feeling that something is wrong, but can't quite place it, doesn't know quite what's going on, and decides to go about his day. Now, they decide to try and visit, the siblings, and find out that they're not permitted in the royal wing anymore. The guards have been instructed by Gwen to not allow Sid and Arthur anywhere near them. And so, they go and they're like, okay, well, if we can't get to them through the royal wing, we know where Gabriel is going to be. He's going to be in the library. And so they do this like shenanigans, like diversion plot where essentially Sydney pretends that he has like an STT. I said STT. STD. STT. That's visibly strange on his member. And the guards are like, huh, yeah. Like, go to check it out.
Well, no, and he's like saying it's about to fall off. And honestly, it kind of feels like, what's that scene in Thor Ragnarok? You know what I'm talking about, between Thor and Loki?
I've never seen it.
They're like, oh, okay, well, never mind. You're not
sorry. That's too straight for me.
That's too straight for me. The people, listeners who are RPH listeners and Marvel lovers will definitely know the reference I'm talking about.
Yes.
Ashton's shaking her head at me. She doesn't believe me.
No, there's no intersection in those fangirls.
Well, I'm here, so I hope there is.
Represent. But yeah, Arthur, meanwhile, sneaks into the library and does find Gabriel, who just like is on high alert. He is like, you should not be here. Like, get out. I don't want to be around you, and like scuttling backwards. And Arthur just has no idea what he's done and is whisked away by guards shortly thereafter. In chapter 30, the Sibbies are back and the final round of the tournament. Now they're about to watch this, fight proceeding. They spot Lord Willard, who is the cousin of the king. That's, cult conspiracy, whatever, over in the visitor stands. And Gwen is immediately like, why the hell is he here? Turns out he was like invited because they're trying to like broker peace between the king and Lord Willard and make a good show of faith to everybody. But, she's kind of trying to be like, all right, this is odd, but okay. Until Arthur's father also shows up in the stands and starts talking to Willard. And this immediately just sets her on high alert. And she's like, okay, all right, I need to tell the king. She tries to get her dad's attention, and he's just fully kind of like brushing her off. Like, come on, this thing's about to start. You're overreacting. Not in those terms, but essentially.
Yeah.
And when she looks back at the stands, Lord de Lacy, Arthur's father, has disappeared. Now, the next chapter,
honestly,
31,
from this point, let's just not even do chapters, because I'll be honest, this is like one long chapter. Like, let's just take it that way.
Let's see how much I remember.
I believe in you. I believe in you. I got you.
Thank you.
I read this less than a couple hours ago, so I can help.
That's real. So Arthur, I think, is like, we gotta go see the cities. We gotta go talk to them. So they march off, him and Sid, trying to go into the tourney. Once again, encounter guards who were like, you can't be here. Stands are all full. You're not allowed in the royal stands. To be completely honest with you, this felt like a moment in fan fiction when you're trying to track the sex positions, because they just switch positions, and it's so horrifically like, where the hell did that limb go? I thought we were here and now we're here. It was that moment for me where all of a sudden Sydney was like, look, no one's at this gate, and you're like, convenient. Yes.
No, so they're going towards the competitors gate, so it was going to where the competitors usually stand, and they were hoping to like shimmy that way. They were hoping there wouldn't be guards there.
I was like,
which makes sense. Why would there be guards at the competitor section if they're all already hanging out in there?
Guess.
I guess. I was like, and stuff. They can do their own stabbing thing. They don't need guards.
I was like, how fucking convenient. I was like, what? But they meander over there and try to like shimmy their way into, because they're intended to like, cut across and go up to the royal stands. But all of a sudden they're intercepted by Arthur's father and some of his like entourage of knights.
Yeah.
And Arthur's like, father? He doesn't actually say that. And there's this big kerfuffle where essentially Arthur's dad is like, son, you're coming with me. And he's like, why? And he's like, just because. And there's like not a whole lot of explanation. And they get into this big breakout fight where Sydney fully steps between Arthur and his father. And his father's like, I pay your wages. And Sydney's like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. Sydney's literally just like, I quit.
I quit. It's wild, but they get apprehended. Bridget actually tries to step in because she sees this at one point and like tries to help out, but then she is sort of also like occupied and like gets cornered by one of the bigger knights. Yeah. And
anyway, and then it jumps back to the siblings.
Yes. Now, all of this commotion is happening, right? And I imagine one corner of the arena, their attention is locked on a new competitor that has entered the arena. Legasp. It's the knife.
Yeah.
It's the knife.
Yeah. Which is like, I honestly gasped a little bit. I was like, what is he doing here? That's so weird. He shouldn't be here. And then I knew instantly. I was like, oh, okay. Because, well, we'll keep going. And then I'll tell you what I was thinking throughout this whole book.
Okay. Remind me.
I will.
So he strides in and they're like, he got booted from the tourney a while ago. He's not a finalist. He's not supposed to be here. And it's at that moment there's this dawning realization as things chaos essentially starts to let loose, where all of the cheating, all of these knights showing up, Lord Willard. This is a coup.
Yeah.
This
dun, dun,
is a coup.
Dun, a coup. A coup.
Yes. As the fight is like going to begin, instead of charging at each other, the knights start, I believe, charging for like the stands, and then like a knife gets thrown into the royal stands, aiming for the king.
Yeah, so basically all of the knights that were in the finals were actually cultists and were actually a part of Willard's group. And so that's the whole thing, is that they turn because they're actually about to kill the king. But Gwen, just in time, like jumps in front of her dad and goes, no! And like pushes him to the ground, and then no knife in dad's forehead.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. When this happened, I had a moment because I was like, oh, I feel like it would be really interesting to see if like all the competitors like that kept like showing up were actually gonna like do a coup or like do a thing where they were like, what's it called when you're stuck in like one walled place and it's like a standoff.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Ashlyn.
Say it again? What's it called if you're stuck in?
Like, it's a battle strategy where a siege. Yes. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just need to talk it through sometimes. So I thought it was going to be like a siege thing, but then I loved it when the knights turned and I was like, it's a coup! I got excited for the coup!
Yes, I know. I was like, ooh, I did not expect this bit happening. I'll be real.
Yeah.
So the
I ate it up. I was like,
no. The royal family scrambles back to the castle, and Gwen is like looking over her shoulder, like, where's Bridget? Bridget was down there. Where is she? And at the last moment, as they're about to be ushered away, she sees Bridget jump up onto where, fun fact, apparently the winning knight of a tournament gets to like pull Excalibur, which is it's like a model recreation of the real sword, but Excalibur out of the stone.
No, the king pulls it out and hands it to them for a little bit, and then he's meant to like put it back. But everyone thinks it's the real sword. It's actually Excalibur the Ninth. Excalibur the Ninth. What happened to the other 9? We don't know. Gwen doesn't know.
Bridget, the last thing Gwen sees is Bridget taking the sword out of the stone and like just jumping back into the fray. It's a cool moment.
It's so cool. I was just like, you go, Bridget. I fucking love you. You're making me love you more and more, and I like it.
Now, the royal family gets ushered into basically the war room, and it's there when they discover that, dun dun dun, Lord Stafford was a traitor.
And I called that ish. I called that. That's what it was. Right after the whole thing, he was like, "No, it must have been someone must have just like snuck in. It was a one-time thing." I'm like, "You're part of this shit, Stafford, and I know it."
They kept mentioning Stafford, but like never giving him any lines or like really even talking about what him and Gabriel are chatting about, to the point where I was like, "Well, clearly he's important to some degree, and I don't think it's in a good way."
No, but when they kept talking about how obsessed he was about the North and like wanting to put troops out there, I was like, I know he's setting something up. I know he's a part of it.
I know. I'm glad we were in agreement. Yes.
We were on the same wavelength. I was like, I know that bastard Stafford is a part of this. He's a weasel. Him.
Yes. He was in on it. He was the reason that an assassinator went after Gabriel. It was fed off as like, this is a one-off thing, not at all related to the stirring uprisings. And indeed, it definitely was. But
actually, the uprisings were like a whole distraction in themselves to send troops up north so that the capital would not have enough people to defend it.
Mm-hmm. And on the while, they still think Arthur is in on this whole thing. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. Now, so we learned...
same thing if I was on the other side of a coup.
That's real.
To be fair.
Now, meanwhile, our traitor, apparently, Arthur, is being dragged basically by his hair, like into sort of like Lord Willard's side and like the encampment that they've staged, because while phase 1 of said coup failed, they're going in for phase 2. And they're like getting more manpower together, and they're like ready to essentially like meet the king's guard halfway and like have a full-on battle. And it's during this where he learns that his father has been in cahoots with Lord Willard, in that Lord Willard is going to take down the king, assume the throne. There's a position involved of power for Lord de Lacy, and that, no longer do they need Arthur to marry Gwen, because this is like apparently just a much better plan. And they're going to plan to kill off Gabriel. They're considering killing off Gwen, but if anything, they want to marry her to Lord Willard, which I'm like,
which is her father's cousin. So
Indeed.
They are related, and I'm like, gross.
And so Arthur and Sid are like shaking in their britches, and they're like, "What the fuck do we do?" And they finally understand now at this point of like, oh, okay. They probably hate us because they think we're involved in this shit.
Yeah.
So now, skip a little bit They decide that Gabriel and Daddy King are going to be fighting in this battle. They get suited up Power Ranger style. Gwen is in distress seeing Gabriel, in this armor. Mommy says bye to Daddy. And the girls are whisked up basically to observe the whole thing from a balcony, and the men go out on the field. So they're gearing up, and they're about to look down on this battle. Meanwhile, Arthur and Sid are like essentially on the front lines of Lord Willard's side, and they're having this whole discussion of like, do I want to die with history believing I'm a traitor, or do I want to die doing something meaningful? And they end up deciding to do something meaningful, which I'll be so fucking real. I don't really know what the fuck was meaningful about it, because I got very confused about what exactly they did.
I don't know. I think it was just trying to be like an obvious defer, but like
it really did not land, I gotta say.
I don't know exactly what happened or what they were thinking, but I think that is just Arthur in general. It's like what will he do? I also love the comment that like while Arthur is being like forced into armor, he's just like, DeLacy just wants us on the front line so we can die. And his dad's like, no, he's not. He loves us. And Arthur's like, no, he doesn't.
He ate with that. He ate.
He did truly. But I did love the whole line about like the femur and stuff like that, and the healed femur. Leading up to that. Do you remember that?
I do remember it. I'll be real. I don't know if I just like couldn't wrap my head around it, but like I almost was like, okay.
So what he was relating it basically back to like his injuries and like them taking care of him. Mm-hmm. So basically, listeners, the whole thing is he asked Sydney if he knew how we discovered what we presume to be the first like realized civilization / like humanity in people. And Sydney didn't know and said it was a femur of this broken person, and from a long time ago, and we found it was healed. And that is the true transformation from like hunter gatherer to like being a part of a community and part of a group, because you have to take time and effort and love and caring to actually like help this person so that their bone can mend and so that they can be a part and contribute to the community again, because they're like a valued member. So I think he was kind of relaying it to that, is that Gwen, Gabriel, Sydney, Agnes, Bridget, they all cared for him when he was in like his desperate dire of like health crisis, which shows him love. And he's like, okay, I need to show them that I love them too, and I'm not gonna just sit here and be a coward and run.
And so instead,
this bitch, this idiotic.
If at any point I get this wrong, please let me know. I really have no idea. So he takes a flag, right?
He takes his father's flag.
Yes,
no, or was still Sir Willard's or something.
It was like enemy flag.
It was a
right?
flag. It was a flag of the other side.
He takes enemy
as
flag.
The two armies are lining up.
And before like there's any like call to action or movement between the two sides, he like bolts from Lord Willard's side, carrying this flag. As he's crossing the divide between the two sides, throws the flag down and it gets trampled and muddied. Is that correct?
Yeah, by like his own horse, which I think he's trying to signify, I don't stand with them. I'm trying to come to you guys.
Yes.
Gwen realizes that because she's seeing all of this. But before anyone else can realize, because Gabriel also realizes because she saw him mouth something to his dad. His dad had already given the order to charge.
Yeah. And Arthur is basically shot down. He's not like injured or anything, I don't think, but he's, down, and he is still recovering from his injuries from chapters ago and can't really walk. And so he kind of just, I'm going to be real,
For the rest of the chapter, he's just on the ground. He's kind of just on the ground.
Is like army crawling, scuttling around. I don't know how he lived. Sid comes after him, wrenches a shield up over them, and I guess that's how they avoid getting trampled. But like, they're literally just laying in the mud. And
Yeah.
I thought it was hilarious. I'm not gonna lie, but
Yeah, I was like,
around.
that's turtle. They're totaling it out.
Now, as they're down there, they see where Bridget is fighting with the knife. Bridget goes down. Sid leaves Arthur to go help, stabs the knife. He backs off and I guess sees a window of opportunity. Again, still struggling to follow. Sees a window of opportunity at some point that the king has been left undefended and goes over there while Sid is helping Bridget up. And it's far too late because then the knife strikes the king down.
Yes.
And
then Sydney kills the knife.
Yes. Sydney kills the knife. And Arthur, he's there on the ground. He gets to the king to hear his dying words, where essentially he's like, come on, like you need to pull through for your children, for Gwen and Gabriel. And the last things that the king utters as like sort of thunder claps across the sky is Gabriel and Gwen. And passes away. I'm gonna be so real. I felt like this was the only time where the author kind of violated the whole like tell don't show thing for me, because all throughout the story, I think we're told repeatedly that their parents are like, despite their faults, like good and loving parents. And yet I just felt like we never got to see that. And the excuse was always sort of like they're tied up with war, which, like, yeah, that makes sense, the context of the story. But for this moment, for me to have been more impactful, I would have liked to have seen that relationship more. And I felt like they just barely had screen time, and we just had to like believe that they were good parents. And I'm like, this does feel very YA.
From what I remember, I do wish we had like more moments between Gwen and her father, because obviously we're in Gwen's POV, so she's going to be the only one who has that deep of relationship with the king.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of agree. I was like, I'm still sad about it. Like, I kind of wish it didn't happen, but
yeah,
I agree. I agree with you kind of on that. I wish we had a couple more moments. So I felt like we had more moments between Gwen and her mom, like bickering with each other.
We so did.
And I would have loved to see that Gwen's like, yeah, more like my dad.
I agree. But Daddy is dead, unfortunately.
My dad.
We perspective jump back to the girlies up on the balcony, and a messenger already arrives to inform them that they want to go to the war room. Wow, war room? Sorry. War room.
Hey, sorry, Miss Queen, but your husband has died.
Why you crying? The queen automatically knows what this means, and so she bursts into tears. She's stricken with grief and like does not leave for the war room. So Gwen does, not knowing exactly what's going on yet.
Yeah.
They take Gwen in, they inform her the king has died, and then basically say, given your mother's indisposed, Gabriel is MIA, you are the one to give the orders. Like, what do we do? Do we pull back our troops who have been discouraged with the king's death? Or do we send in the last of our men and just hope that that's enough? And she ultimately makes the call to send in the men with one certain caveat.
With one little caveat.
As we get back on the field, Arthur and Sydney see a torrent of like soldiers coming out, led by someone with like red hair, who at first they think is Gabriel because, stuffed in armor and like striding across. But then upon further inspection, they see it's Gwen, like posing as her brother to like reinvigorate the troops and be like, the new king is alive and like, we got all the strength and whatever. And it works. It works. The troops rally, and there's like another wave that they push back against Willard's troops. In this fray, actually, Arthur spots Gabriel because this mangy little crow from, many chapters back in the falconry from where they first kissed flies overhead.
Morgana? Yeah, she's there.
Yes, she flies overhead and identifies where Gabriel has been essentially trampled. Like, his arm is fucked up. And it's hard to tell if he's even alive. And so Arthur's kneeling over him, and he's like, Gabriel, like, please, you could be dead later. Like, please come back. Like, we need you. And Lord Willard shows up and sort of stands ominously over them and is like,
oh, you found him for me. Thanks.
Yes, that's exactly what he says. And he's like, let me stabby stab. And Arthur, being, compromised, can't defend himself.
Yeah.
But you know who can? Bridget,
Lady Leclerc.
This is a Game of Thrones show, spoilers, so if you don't want spoilies, plug your ears. It's giving Arya jumping down on the Night King for me.
Very
That's
much
exactly what it is. She cuts him down and kills him with Excalibur the Ninth. Gwen returns back safe and sound to the castle. She sort of, to my understanding, does sort of like a round town, bring it around town just to like show off. Yes, and then goes back in where Agnes meets her and whatever.
They get the armor off so that when Gabriel shows up, they're not like.
Yes. And the battle dissipates at this point, I guess, with both kings dead. Essentially,
Yeah.
And, their troops beat them back and, they go out running looking for their friends and find out, surprise, everyone's alive. Gabriel's fucked up, but he's alive.
Hey,
and
he's alive.
He's alive. And they all run out to each other in this really nice, embracing each other. Like literally Gwen is like, I don't know who to run for, Bridget or Arthur. So let me embrace them both. Which again, I think goes to show the true love is friendship. God, that's my biggest takeaway. They sort of, I'm gonna be real with you, they sort of just drop in on Gabriel as he's literally half conscious and
he's
in the middle of everyone.
And Gwen's like, by the way, our dad is dead. You're the king.
I'm sorry, the way these teenagers handle taking lives and the deaths of family members was so relatively nonchalant. I was like, where's the grief? Where's the PTSD?
It's for later. It's for 3 months later, baby. In that last chapter.
We're teenagers. We're invincible. Gabe gets really sick at this news and literally voms as his first moments as king. And then the joke that ends that chapter is him being like, oh, I can't believe they saw me vomit.
Yeah. But don't forget, Gwen and Bridget got to kiss in front of everybody because no one was caring because they were just like, whoa, we survived.
Oh, yeah.
They got to kiss.
Leave it to you to remember that moment.
I'm going to remember that they kissed because I love them so much.
Listen, that's fair. We do a little jump ahead. To, speaking of letters and whatnot, chapter 39 is essentially one big missive between Gwen and Bridget, where Gwen writes to Bridget, who is away, having followed her, commitments to being gone and returning in the winter, at another tournament. And we sort of gather that, Bridget has become a celebrity of sorts because word traveled about her, cutting down Willard, wielding Excalibur, just being this absolutely undefeated torrent on the field. And she's a bit uncomfortable with, I know, she's a bit uncomfortable with all the attention, but still wants to compete humbly in tournaments and seems to be, still just doing her thing. Gwen has seemingly gotten over her thou shalt be with me type mentality and seems very supportive, of Bridget and is wishing her luck and talking about how she's excited to see her. And I think there's a line in there, I think it's from Bridget, who's like, I've never been so excited to see Frost on the ground.
That was from Bridget.
That was really sweet. And then the final chapter of the book is kind of an epilogue of sorts, where it's, weeks later, undetermined amount of time. And we are in the garden area where the author Pendragon statue is. Mm-hmm. And Gabriel is in there. He has had his arm amputated. He's in there preparing to deliver a royal decree, a speech. And he's yes. And he's poring over this. And, Arthur walks in to visit. And we sort of gather that this speech is going to sort of be addressing the fact that he is courting Arthur and that, you know, the kids
Arthur?
are gay. Arthur.
You said author.
Sorry, I cannot speak.
That was your southern accent coming out. But
Arthur.
also throughout that whole, right before that, it kind of went into Arthur going in and seeing Gabriel like a couple weeks after the battle, and him being like, "So are we good? Can we like kiss now?" And Gabriel's like, "Yeah, I want to kiss now. I want to do that."
Yes, he's a lot more sure of himself, which is really nice, and you can kind of see that he's living to be king for himself for once, which is great.
Exactly. And this is, it's that final moment of him being like, well, my father never took a stance on a lot of things, and I want to be a king that does that. And you're just like, you go, Gabe.
I'm glad you said that, because I think my favorite line of this entire book is actually that line where he basically says, like, you know, my father never took a hard stance on anything, and he still ended up dead.
Yeah, they still killed him.
And then he says, like, you know, if I'm going to die, at least essentially, you know, I want it to be worth it, or I want to have stood for something.
Exactly.
I loved that. I loved that so much.
I do wish we could have seen that growth on the pages, but
agreed. So hardly agreed. But alas, and they're all in this garden. Sydney and Agnes literally will not stop sucking face, and I'm like, please.
They're making out like so hardcore. I'm like, dear God, how is she not pregnant yet?
It's crazy. And then Bridget ends up walking in, and she is in a dress, and she, you know, very much hates it. And she's like, you know, I figured for this day and what it stands for, I will appease Gwen and her mother and show up prim and proper. And then after this, never again.
Yeah. Fair. I love her.
Gwen comes in to join. Apparently, the relationship with her mother is like improving, but still kind of strained because she's still very grief stricken, but is trying to spend more time with her kids and is now in the know about their sexualities and is trying to come to terms with it. But there's still, you know, definitely a lot of room to grow. And then I think it kind of ends with them all sort of like, you know, walking out of this courtyard together. The scene sort of peels back as, you know, they're all following Gabe to like deliver his speech. And then I think the last mention of the book is like statue and like the crow taking flight. So,
yep.
That is the end of Gwen and Art Are Not in Love. Do we have questions, Squire Ashland?
Oh, I'm the squire now?
Yes.
Hear ye. I have questions.
Then
we have
answers.
Oh. Who is your favorite couple at the end of the book?
Gwen and Arthur.
I love that you're still sticking to the friendship, and I'm just like Gwen and Bridget all the way. I love them so much together.
I loved everyone. Like, I truly enjoyed all aspects of like relationship, platonics or not in this story. But yeah, I do love our main characters a lot. That's simply where that comes from. And, you know, I'm glad that they ended up being like really good friends at the end as well.
Oh.
What do you think of reading our first queer YA novel?
Give me more. I want more.
I have read quite a few in my spare time, just over the past couple of years. And like, you know, there's some good ones out there. For me personally, this one is the first to like really bridge that gap and resonate with me and like scratch that itch that like really good YA books do. Because as I mentioned earlier, to me, sometimes I feel like it's a little bit too cheesy, a little too like, wow, everyone time travels and like, you know, lesbians in space and like a whole bunch of like stuff that I think is cute when you're in those developmental years. But for me as an adult, I like something a little more grounded and like selfless, real, attainable love. And I do think despite the fantastical aspects of this book, I think the dynamics between the characters really do achieve that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I really liked this and would have, as you said earlier, Sid, loved to have read something like this in my growing up. Like, this is wonderful
100%.
representation and always room to expand upon more, and would love to continue seeing stories like this for the kiddos, as they say.
for the future generations. I will say also, Ashlyn, how did you feel about reading a queer romance where the two ladies weren't in a weird situation or like time travel or something?
It was normal. Finally normal. There wasn't even magic. Thank God. This is all I've been asking for years. This is all that I've wanted. Thank you, Lex, for giving me my dreams. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. This is my first time reading a queer YA, like just queer YA book in general. So I mean, I want to read more good ones because I don't know. I want to share that art with younger people because, like, when I was growing up and when I was not sure what my sexuality was, I think this book may have really made me feel seen as, like, because I was very confused. I didn't know whether I liked girls or liked boys, and I knew I somewhat liked both, but I didn't know what that meant. So it means a lot to me because, like, back then, what was readily available to me wasn't like like I read a lot of fan fiction. I don't think there was a lot of targeted YA books towards me, and if they were mainly men loving men relationships. So seeing one where it's including a woman loving woman relationship or female presenting person to female presenting person, it's really important because everyone should feel seen and heard. And it was just a lovely book. And yeah, it means a lot. And I will be reading more.
How do you feel about the dialogue in this book?
I don't have any particular feelings about it, to be honest. Like, nothing really jumps out to me as like I liked it or I didn't like it. I will say, to me, it was not for me, it was not like this book's strongest point. Not like in a bad way, but like for me, my biggest like love of this book and where the writing style really shines was more in the narration and like those like little differences between like the characters' more so than the dialogue itself.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think sometimes the dialogue felt a little too modern teenager or someone trying to write like a modern teenager sometimes. So I in the beginning it was a little jarring, but by the time you get into like the middle of the book, you're in it and you're just in the flow and you're just in this universe. So I wouldn't say it bothered me too much per se. There were moments, but otherwise it was good. Trying to think if I have any other comments. I think that's it. I also agree that the narrative was good and the building of the relationships, I think, was its strong point rather than the actual dialogue.
And lastly, my dear queens, what is your final rating?
I'm actually excited to deliver my rating.
Would you like me to go first so we can hold yours?
Sure, please do.
All right. Hear ye, all and wide, for the RPH kingdom. I decree by your Queen Sydney that this book is rated a 4.5.
Snaps all around from the peasants.
Snaps all around. From all of the peasants.
Yes.
But yeah, overall, I took notes. I should actually read my notes. You know, that's like a crazy concept. Like I do all this work and I don't read my notes. So I'll be completely honest with you guys. It was a bit of a slower start for me going into this book. However, by the time I got into it, I was into it for the long haul. I was in it to finish it. And it wasn't like a slower start as in like, I'm going to DNF this. It was more like, I'm not as into it as I could be. And then once I got in, I was locked in. I ate this book up. It was so good. I would say it was around the 100-page mark is when I got like really clicked, where it really clicked for me. And I just like went super fast. I loved the growth and the depth of the characters and how they were all their own personalities and how they were all pretty easy to follow with who was who. I loved the relationships between Gabriel and Arthur and Bridget and Gwen. I even I obviously love the moments between Gwen and Arthur and their friendship growing. I even love the moments between Arthur and Bridget and him being like, yeah, I'm a big macho man. And Bridget's like, let me knock you down a peg. Like, I loved all of their unique little ways and how they interacted with each other. I loved the world building and how dynamic it was. And it was just a very interesting book that was very easily captured my imagination. So yeah, that's why I give it a 4.5.
Lauren has come to deliver a royal decree. Dear gentle reader. Okay, I'll stop. I think I have always rated every book that we have read on the Raunchy Power Hour podcast within its own microcosm of Raunchy Power Hour verse, if you will. Mm-hmm. I try not to hold them to the same system or like handle as I would a book, like any book of like different genres that I would pick up of my own accord. Because I feel like for me, as someone who actually often doesn't reach for like a straight up romance book in my day to day, I don't want to like hold books that like I'm not usually like even suited to in the first place to books that I am judging to like their full potential and like full harshness of like, I fully want this book to wow me. Right. And so with that said, I'm actually quite softer on my Raunchy Power Hour book ratings than I think I otherwise would if I were to rate them up against the books that I normally read, like anything that I read throughout the year. With that being said, this I can confidently say is the first book that we have read where my rating for within the microcosm of RPH is the same as holding it up to everything else. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. So much so that one, I bought a copy, which is monumental. I never do that for our books. I bought a copy. I would be open to rereading this book, which is huge for me. That's usually what I reserve for my I know. That's usually what I reserve for my 4 and 5 star reads. So like for me, actually, I'm texting my partner, babe, this might be a 5-star read. This might be a 5-star. I was in it from page 1, and I don't know why. I really cannot express why, but it hooked me, and I really liked it. There were some things that happened, I'd say, in the second half of this that I was kind of a little bit lost on, and there were some moments where like the dialogue did take me out, and I was like, okay. All that being said, I give it a 4.25. All the way around, which is like high praise from me.
That's insane. That is like a 6-star from me.
It is. I have, if you ever go into my personal Goodreads profile, which don't stop me, parasocial freaks, but if you two ever go on my personal Goodreads profile, you will see there's only like 5 books I've ever rated a 5-star. And like, yeah, basically anything that's like just shy of perfection gets in the 4-star category. So this was really good for me. And I'm pleased to announce I like romance novels.
What?
At least this one.
What a crazy concept. What a crazy concept. We're about to go. We're going to ruin that with the next pick.
I know. I hate it. I hate it here.
The vicious cycle we go into. And on that high note, with Lauren reading that book of 4.25, we're going to close it out. Thank you so much, Lex Croucher, for Croucher. I said Croucher. I meant Croucher. I'm so sorry. You're not a Croucher. Thank you so much for releasing this book. We really enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed our review of this book, we have like a lot of others if you would like to go check out our other books. If you'd like to go check out our other book recommendations. So if you want to do that, go listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you decide to get your podcasts. And if you would like to interact more with us on our social media, we would love that, but you're also more feral if you decide to do that. But if you want to do that, you can go join us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Twitch. We do have a YouTube channel where intermediately some of our podcasts will go up there. And also you can follow us on Fable. So there you will actually get real-time updates on books that we are reading. And next month, unfortunately, I am here to announce that we will be reading Slammed by Colleen Hoover. Yay! We're going back into the Go universe. Ashlyn's so excited. I am terrified, but that is just the way, that is the vicious cycle in which we have created here at Raunchy Power Hour. And with that, I'm going to say good night to all you good-looking guys, gals, and all my non-binary pals. Also, happy Pride.